Hi, I'm Patricia Polacco, and I write and illustrate children's picture books. And just like all of you, I am bound to my house. This crisis has made us all have to stay within our homes. Some of us can't even go to work. Certainly we can't travel anymore. We have to stay home. And the reason being is our government feels that this tiny little microbe, it's a tiny little germ, can be spread by simply contacting each other. This is why my assistant, who is filming this, is over 6 feet away from me. When she came to my home, we didn't hug and kiss like we usually do. We stood apart, and we are respecting the distance. They're worried about coughing and droplets. But now you kids, what you need to know. This isn't the end of the world. We're doing this. Our government is doing this. Our states are doing this. They're imposing, I guess, a home quarantine, for want of a better word, to make sure that we don't get too close to people that might be infected with this illness. And they're trying very hard to stop it from getting any worse, which means you've got to stay home. Now, you kids, this means your schools are closed, so you're probably not seeing friends that you see every day. You probably can't go out and play in the neighborhood like you always used to. You're pretty much confined to home. If your parents are still working, you're probably home with older siblings. If your parents aren't working, they're home with you. And these are very hard times for all of us, because for most of us, this means our incomes have come to pretty much a screeching halt. But that doesn't, you're going to be just fine, because the stores are opening and they're going to be delivering food. So you certainly, nothing terrible is going to happen to you. I guess the worst part for you kids is that you can't be at school with your friends. But endure this, because like I say, if we can crush this epidemic before it gets any worse, that is exactly what we should be doing. Now, I've been reading some books. We've recorded a few of them, but one I want to show you, because we're coming on to the Eastertide season, is Rechenka's eggs. See these eggs right here? This is what Pysanky eggs look like. I have real Pysanky eggs all over my house. As a matter of fact, follow me. Come along with me. Now, Penny has to walk a distance away from me. But if you, Penny, come in close to, I'm going to step back, come in close to the bird cages and show the Pysanky eggs. The reason I have them in cages is I have lots and lots of cats, and my cats will knock them off from tables and kill them. So when we have them in bird cages, this more or less protects them. Now, I had a very lovely neighbor just deliver some chickens to me. This is what's happening in my neighborhood. People are sharing food. I have young people that work for me, like Miss Penny, who's filming this, who are bringing supplies, which is happening in our major cities, which is just a wonderful thing. You know, this crisis has made it possible for us to learn to care for each other and literally change lives. But anyway, since it's almost Easter, I wanted to read this story to you. It's called Rechenka's Eggs. Now, Rechenka in Russian means little river. My family is from Russia and the Ukraine, so drawing this wonderful Canada goose here and these lovely eggs made my heart sing. This is kind of a story similar to the goose that laid the golden egg, I guess. But I used the same format to tell this story, so I'm going to read it to you because I'm proud of it. Oh, this is when LeVar Burton came to my house, because they filmed me in my backyard painting these eggs. LeVar met his wife in my kitchen. That's my main claim to fame. Anyway, and he signed this book also. Rechenka's Eggs, written and illustrated by Patricia Polacco. Oops, where's my glasses? There they are. I need them. Now, this book was dedicated to Vladimir Posner and Phil Donahue for Bridges of Understanding. Phil Donahue used to be a television host, and this was probably 20, almost 30 years ago. And there had been animosity between Russia and the United States for years. It was called the Cold War after the Second World War. Vladimir Posner and Mr. Donahue did everything they can through television programming for the Russian people to meet Americans and the Americans to meet them. And they did indeed build bridges, and that's why I loved it, because those were my people reaching out to each other, in my opinion. So that's why the dedication reads what it does. I'm going to begin now. Babushka lived alone in a dacha, a little house in the country. But she was known far and wide for the fine eggs she had lovingly painted. Her eggs were so beautiful that she always won the first prize at the Easter festival in Moskva, which is Moscow. Now, these eggs actually are not painted. They are done by batiking. In other words, when you go to buy your Easter egg supplies, you get the little pills that are the dye. You hard boil some eggs, but in that dye kit, you'll find a white crayon, which is wax. And do you notice anywhere you draw with that crayon on the shell, the dye won't go? Well, that's exactly how these eggs are done. But that intricate pattern is drawn on with a tiny little tool called a kiska, tiny little brass funnel. And you scrape beeswax in it, hold it over a candle till it's hot, and then you draw on the surface of the egg. And then you dye the egg. You start with yellow, then you draw on it again, dye it red, draw on it again, dye it blue, draw on it again. You go through a whole succession of colors until the last dye you dip the eggs in is black. Then the egg is taken, here's a candle with a flame, and you hold the egg over the candle and all of the wax melts off. When the wax melts off, this is how the eggs look. This is how they look. I mean, isn't this amazing? So in the book, I'm saying painted, but they are not painted at all. They are gotten by, literally, I guess you would call it batiking, or lost wax. Each day, Babushka would take the shell of an egg from her basket and paint it in wonderful designs, using the shapes of stars and flowers, triangles and circles. Through the long and cold winter, Babushka painted. But she's actually using a kiska. Then one day, after a snowstorm, Babushka went outside. She could still hear the faint sound of falling snow. It's a sound like soft rain. Herds of caribou came to feed at Babushka's because the grasses they usually eat were covered with snow. A miracle, she whispered as she fed some. Those wild things have found their way to me. Just then, a flock of noisy geese honked loudly overhead. As they glided over the snow, one of them faltered and fell from the sky. Babushka went to where that goose lay, crumbled in the snow. "A hunter did this," Babushka grumbled. She carefully picked up that little goose and took it back in to her lovely little dacha. Then she fed the little goose from her own table and put the goose in her best basket lined with the warmest quilt from her own bed. "I shall name you a good name, one that we both can like, eh, my little friend?" she said as she patted the goose's head. "How do you like Rechenka?" "Yes, then Rechenka it shall be." With Babushka's care, Rechenka grew stronger as each day passed. To repay her kindness, Rechenka laid an egg for breakfast every morning. As Rechenka got better, she waddled around the little house, exploring every nook, cupboard, and corner. One day, she jumped on top of Babushka's work table, overturning the jars of bright-colored paint that she used to color the eggs. "Yet!" Babushka screamed as she chased the goose with a broom. "No!" The frightened goose flapped her wings to get away and knocked over the basket of eggs that Babushka had so lovingly prepared. The eggs crashed to the floor and shattered into a million pieces. They were both very sad. There was no reason now for Babushka to go to the festival. All of her eggs were broken by that little goose. No fault of the goose, but they were. The next morning, Babushka slowly got out of bed and trundled over to Rechenka's basket to get her morning egg. But when she reached into the middle of the quilt, she picked out the most brilliantly colored egg that she had ever seen. "A miracle," Babushka whispered. "A miracle." She made small holes at both ends of the eggs and blew the yolk and white into a dish to cook and eat later for breakfast. Then she held the egg up to the morning light and marveled at its beauty. After that, every morning for 12 mornings, there was another egg, each more beautiful than the one laid the day before. Soon Babushka had enough eggs to take to the festival in Moscow. How wonderful, she thought. A miracle has replaced the eggs that were broken. "Spring is here, my little friend," Babushka said to Rechenka the morning of the festival. "Soon now you will be flying off to the north to be with your flock." She bustled to the hearth fire and brewed some of her most favored tea. The two shared a saucer of tea with kulich, a sweet Easter bread. She covered each piece with pashka, a spread of cheese, butter, and raisins. They savored each bite together. "One for you and one for me," Babushka chanted. "Da, my little friend, I shall sorely miss you, but you are a wild thing, and a miracle sent you to me. It would not be right to ask you to stay here with me forever." Then Babushka left her little house. She took one last look at Rechenka sitting on the doorstep. She waved, then took determined steps for Moscow with the basket of her very precious eggs. She crossed Lebetov Valley, where the caribou mothers were walking their newborn calves. A miracle, she thought. New little lives. A miracle. She crossed the bridge over the Moskva River, and soon she could see the onion domes of old Moscow. The festival was bright and exciting. There were goat carts selling kulich, processions, dancers, jugglers, laughing children, playing and running. Babushka showed her old friends the eggs. Her eggs were the most beautiful of all of Russia, they thought. "Look at them," the elders said. "They almost glow, as if the paint is part of the shell itself." The judges picked Babushka's eggs as the most beautiful in all of Russia. Babushka was so happy. She beamed as she looked at the first prize, a beautiful feather bed quilt. As Babushka made her way homeward, a honking flock of geese flew overhead. Babushka gave them a long, lingering look. She wondered if Rechenka was one of them. When Babushka arrived at her home that evening, Rechenka was gone. Alone, she put the new quilt on her little bed. She brewed a cup of tea, ate the last of the kulich and pashka, got into bed with her favorite book of poems, and drifted off to sleep. She hadn't noticed Rechenka's basket. That night, Babushka was awakened from a sound sleep by an ever so small sound. It was coming from Rechenka's basket. She hobbled closer and saw a glorious egg, but this one was different from all the others. It quivered and moved. It made muffled sounds. The egg jumped, bumped, and rolled and pitched in the basket. Then there was a crack, and Babushka could see the very special gift that Rechenka had left for her. "Oh, a miracle," Babushka said. And this little goose remained with Babushka always. And that is the story of Rechenka's eggs. I hope all of you have a lovely Easter, and I hope the bunny makes their way to your home and leaves an egg or two. Just remember, if the crisis is still happening, you probably won't be going to Easter parties or Easter egg hunts. Instead, celebrate with your families. You know, someday we're going to look back on this time and remember the time when all of us got to be with our families, that we didn't even have to go into work anymore. We were with the people we love. And someday you're going to be so thankful for this time that we've had together as families. So please, don't despair and don't worry. Our government and the doctors have the situation in hand, and I'm perfectly confident this will pass. And when it does, we're all going to be better for it. You know why? Because we've literally learned to reach out to each other and embrace each other, even though we can't physically. We're embracing each other in our hearts. How wonderful that is. As Babushka would say, all a miracle. Thank you.